Okay, so I am now recording. With the assignment for week 3, what we're going to be doing, I'm going to have you make an infographic. Now, an infographic is a very, very loose term. It's just a graphic that you're putting together with words to demonstrate something. So in this case, I'd like you to pick an optical illusion, and you can get that either one that's from the book, or you can get one that's online from a source online. Any image that you see something in it that doesn't exist, or it's misleading you to see something else. Okay, so that's what the optical illusion is. So what you'll be doing with that is going into your chapter 3 in your book and picking out one of those perception, or it could be a visual optical illusion. Okay, so and I'll talk about the difference between sensation and perception here a little bit. But is it one that affects your senses, like your sight, or well, not your hearing obviously, but does it affect your sight, or is it affecting how you're seeing it with your mind? So for example, we talked about Gestalt in chapter 3. We didn't cover it in the lecture, but in your book, we talked about Gestalt principles, right? We talked about top-down and bottom-up processing, depth perception. What else? What are some of the linear perspective? Like, what are some tricks that if we see something that looks like it's pointing off to a horizon, but we're seeing 2 different sizes? Okay, that's linear perception and relative size. So pick some of those concepts out of your book and describe what you're seeing in that. And that's really all I want for that. Okay, and it could be in a PowerPoint slide, it could be PDF. If you want to put the images into a Word document and do it that way, you're certainly welcome to do that. Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So, first off, like you were saying, you said that we could do it as an MS, like Word, basically like an essay, correct, or a PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, and not only that, but like the infographic, where would you want us to put it? Like, if we were doing an essay, because I was intending on like doing more of an essay rather than a PowerPoint.
Well, an infographic, again, is just a term that we use to have pictures and words describing the pictures. So there's really no set format to that, and you can certainly get creative in how you put that together. It's kind of like a collage. If you want to do an essay, that is perfectly fine too. I'm not going to, but as long as you have the picture in there, the picture component, so I can see what you're talking about. Okay.
So we could just put in a picture of the illusion.
Yep. Just include a picture in the illusion somewhere.
Okay. Do we need a caption under it too?
Need the what?
Do we need like a caption underneath the picture?
Your words are going to describe what you're seeing in the picture. You don't necessarily need a caption unless you want to put it.
And the reference, would we need a reference like right underneath?
Of course. If you're using, if you're using the book, especially, you're going to want to put a reference page. You should have a reference page, 100%.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
A student asked about the group project. Have you assigned them yet for the groups?
I'm going to be working diligently. I still have some students that registered late that I'm getting their information in. I'm going to be working diligently on that tomorrow. So I'm hoping by tomorrow night that you'll all have your groups assigned. Now, when that happens, I'll send out a message to everybody so you can look. You'll be able to go under content and then under group project discussion, and you'll see your group listed there. Because right now, I think you see all, I have about like groups A through F. Once you're assigned a group, you'll only be able to see the group that you're assigned to. One note on that while we're talking about groups. Once I assign your group, please get in there and just say hello as soon as possible. A couple of my other classes that I'm doing this with, it's taken them a while, and some of the students are getting panicky. So even if you just say hello and how you would like to communicate or something, do that by maybe the end of the weekend or something, just so other students have a chance to get in there and say hi too. You will have an assignment due on week 4. You can view that in assessments in week 4. And it's very simple assignment. Just how are you going to communicate? Many of you are going to school full time. Some of you are working full time and going to school full time. If that's the case, how do you feel you're going to overcome some of those time constraints, some of those obstacles? Okay. All right. Anything else before we get into our lesson today? Okay. Very good. So for chapter 3, what we are looking at is how, chapter 2, we talked about areas of the brain, the biological perspective as to how neurons travel throughout our body and into our mind, and they activate certain areas of our brain, albeit remembering something or learning something, or just visually get taken in or auditorily taken in what's around us, right? So all these senses come in as an input. This is how we take in the world around us, either through one of 5 senses. What are our 5 senses? Who wants to?
Look, touch, smell, taste, and hearing.
Right. So any one of those or all of those at one time, we're able to take those in and formulate an idea, a thought, an awareness around our environment based on what we've experienced before. So when we look at that, we consider this in 2 realms when we talk about sensory and perception. So sensation, is the actual input that we receive. And that's through one of our 5 senses. Okay. Perception is how we mentally process that information. So information comes in, right? And then it goes in through up through our spinal cord into our brains, where our brains then manipulate that. It processes that to create a thought, create an experience, okay? So 2 different things going on here. Now, when we get into perception, again, we're going to talk about like cognitive realms, like how are we with like Gestalt, being able to piece things together, making something out of nothing just based on our experience. Perception is very experience-based, okay? So we can't know that something is, for example, if we look at a flower, if you can imagine you as a baby, like in a baby mind that has never seen a flower before, how does that work? I mean, how do you know that that is a flower? We call it a flower, we spell flower. How do you know that's a flower? Where did you get that information?
You learned it from your parents. They taught you that it's a flower.
Right. Through education, through learning, through our environment, through our parents, through school, right? So once we get that information, and we're wired to look at things that way with curiosity. We see something new and we say, I don't know what that is. That's very foreign. And we identify, and you think of this from an evolutionary perspective, is I want to identify that as a friend or foe. Is that something that can harm me, or is that something that I can use to meet my biological needs, which would be food or stress reduction or something. So until we identify that, we're going to learn more about it. We're going to learn what it's called, what its function is, until it is no longer a threat and it kind of just fades into the background of our environment, right? So sensation and perception. Now, before we get into the details of sensation and perception, I do want to share with you, it's probably one of my favorite videos. His name is Daniel Kish. He is well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to let him do his own introduction here. So bear with me here. Let me share my other screen. Wish there was a quicker way just to toggle screens in this. I'm sure I'll figure it out eventually. All right.
I was born with bilateral retinoblastoma, retinal cancer. My right eye was removed at 7 months of age. I was 13 months when they removed my left eye. The first thing I did upon awakening from that last surgery was to climb out of my crib and begin wandering around the intensive care nursery, probably looking for the one who did this to me. Evidently, wandering around the nursery was not a problem for me without eyes. The problem was getting caught. It's impressions about blindness that are far more threatening to blind people than the blindness itself. Think for a moment about your own impressions of blindness. Think about your reactions when I first came onto the stage, or the prospect of your own blindness, or a loved one going blind. The terror is incomprehensible to most of us, because blindness is thought to epitomize ignorance and unawareness, hapless exposure to the ravages of the dark unknown. How poetic. Fortunately for me, my parents were not poetic. They were pragmatic. They understood that ignorance and fear were but matters of the mind, and the mind is adaptable. They believed that I should grow up to enjoy the same freedoms and responsibilities as everyone else. In their own words, I would move out, which I did when I was 18. I will pay taxes. Thanks. And they knew the difference between love and fear. Fear immobilizes us in the face of challenge. They knew that blindness would pose a significant challenge. I was not raised with fear. They put my freedom first before all else, because that is what love does. Now, moving forward, how do I manage today? The world is a much larger nursery. Fortunately, I have my trusty long cane, longer than the canes used by most blind people. I call it my freedom staff. It will keep me, for example, from making a undignified departure from the stage. I do see that cliff edge. They warned us earlier that every imaginable mishap has occurred to speakers up here on the stage. I don't care to set a new precedent. But beyond that, many of you may have heard me clicking as I came onto the stage with my tongue. Those are flashes of sound that go out and reflect from surfaces all around me, just like a bat sonar, and return to me with patterns, with pieces of information, much as light does for you. And my brain, thanks to my parents, has been activated to form images in my visual cortex, which we now call the imaging system, from those patterns of information, much as your brain does. I call this process flash sonar. It is how I have learned to see through my blindness, to navigate my journey through the dark unknowns of my own challenges, which has earned me the moniker, the remarkable Batman. Now, Batman, I will accept. Bats are cool. Batman is cool. But I was not raised to think of myself as in any way remarkable. I have always regarded myself, much like anyone else, who navigates the dark unknowns of their own challenges. Is that so remarkable? I do not use my eyes, I use my brain. Now, someone somewhere must think that's remarkable, or I wouldn't be up here. But let's consider this for a moment. Everyone out there who faces or who has ever faced a challenge, raise your hands. Whoosh. Okay, lots of hands going up. A moment, let me do a head count. This will take a while. Okay, lots of hands in the air. Keep them up. I have an idea. Those of you who use your brains to navigate these challenges, put your hands down. Okay, anyone with your hands still up has challenges of your own. So we all face challenges, and we all face the dark unknown, which is endemic to most challenges, which is what most of us fear, okay? But we all have brains that allow us, that activate to allow us to navigate the journey through these challenges, okay? Case in point, so I came up here and they wouldn't tell me where the lectern was. So you can't trust those TED folks. Find it yourself, they said. So, and the feedback from the PA system is no help at all. So now I present to you a challenge. So if you'd all close your eyes for just a moment, okay? And you're going to learn a bit of flash sonar. I'm going to make a sound. I'm going to hold this panel in front of me, but I'm not going to move it. Just listen to the sound for a moment. Okay, nothing very interesting. Now, listen to what happens to that same exact sound when I move the panel. You do not know the power of the dark side. I couldn't resist. Okay, now keep your eyes closed, because did you hear the difference? Okay, now let's be sure. For your challenge, you tell me, just say now, when you hear the panel start to move. Okay? We'll relax into this. Good, excellent. Open your eyes. All right. So, just a few centimeters, you would notice the difference. You've experienced sonar. You'd all make great blind people. Let's have a look at what can happen when this activation process is given some time and attention.
It's like if you guys can see with your eyes, and we can see with our ears.
It's not a matter of enjoying it more or less, it's about enjoying it differently.
Goes across,
Yeah.
and then it's gradually coming back down again.
Yes.
That's amazing. I can like see the car. Holy mother.
Yeah, I know. Go. The passing a tree on the right. I think you're okay.
I love being blind. If I had the opportunity, honestly, I wouldn't go back to being sighted.
The bigger the goal, the more obstacles you'll face. And on the other side of that goal is victory.
Stop. E allora? È stato bellissimo vederlo, Juan. Vieni.
Now, do these people look terrified? Not so much. We have delivered activation training to tens of thousands of blind and sighted people from all backgrounds in nearly 40 countries. When blind people learn to see, sighted people seem inspired to want to learn to see their way better, more clearly, with less fear, right? Because this exemplifies the immense capacity within us all to navigate any type of challenge, through any form of darkness, to discoveries unimagined when we are activated. I wish you all a most activating journey. Thank you very much.
Daniel, my friend, that, as I know you can see, is a spectacular standing ovation at TED, and thank you for an extraordinary talk. Just one more question about your world, your inner world that you construct. We think that we have things in our world that you as a blind person don't have, but what's your world like? What do you have that we don't have?
360-degree view. Okay, so my sonar works about as well behind me as it does in front of me. It works around corners. It works through surfaces. Generally, it's kind of a fuzzy, three-dimensional geometry. One of my students, who's now become an instructor, when he lost his vision after a few months, he was sitting in his 3-story house, and he realized that he could hear everything going on throughout the house. Conversations, people in the kitchen, people in the bathroom, several floors away, several walls away. He said it was something like having X-ray vision.
What do you picture that you're in right now? How do you picture this theater?
Lots of loudspeakers, quite frankly. You know, it's interesting. When people make a sound, when they laugh, when they fidget, when they take a drink or blow their nose or whatever, I hear everything. I hear every little movement that every single person makes. None of it really escapes my attention. And then, you know, from a sonar perspective, the size of the room, the curvature of the audience around the stage, it's the height of the room. Like I say, it's all that kind of three-dimensional surface geometry all around me.
Well, Daniel, you have done a spectacular job of helping us all see the world in a different way. Thank you so much for that, truly.
Thank you.
That was amazing.
All right. So what'd you all think? What'd you think of Daniel's speech? What did you gain from that?
If you're blind, like, your other senses improve. So, like, for example, his hearing was, like, very powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah. What else?
When you're blind, you also, like, it gets your brain like thinking more, where you start like imagining what something looks like rather than like actually seeing it with your eyes.
Right. Because we do, it's even in our terminology, the visual cortex, our visual spatial recognition, right? We think of things in terms of vision, when in reality, last week we learned about the occipital lobe, which is responsible for our spatial awareness through our vision, right? It's right in the terminology that we use. However, he's still using the visual cortex of his brain. He's just using it differently. He's still aware of his surroundings. It's just through the enhanced, like Mark said, the enhanced sounds that he's getting.
I have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
All right, so they say like if you lose a sense, right, one gets stronger. So when you lose your sense, does that part of your cortex become stronger, or what makes the other senses stronger when you lose one?
It becomes different, and that's a good question. We see that. I think we did talk. We didn't talk about it. It was in your book about plasticity. Plasticity is the process by which our brain, if we lose functioning in one area of it, it'll pick up in another area of our brain. So, for example, our temporal lobe, if for whatever reason is damaged, we may lose our ability to either recognize language or recognize words, or even speak, depending on which part is damaged. But through training and through either professional training or through our own senses, we may, the other side, the other temporal lobe may pick up the area that has lost functioning. Maybe not to 100%, but to probably a good extent where we're able to function once again. And we see that a lot with stroke victims that lose mobility or lose some kind of cognitive ability. One area of their brain might pick up that slack and reroute those neurons. So good question. And yeah, I mean, to answer that question, yeah, absolutely. And he talked about the newly blind, his student that was newly blind started picking up on sounds that were happening in 3 levels of his house, right? One of the things that I really took away from this message was fear. And I like to introduce this video early on because number one, it talks about senses, it talks about plasticity, and it talks about overcoming fear. Because remember what I said, what are we? We are 2 things as humans. What are they? Anybody remember? Uh-oh. We are 2
Air?
things. Okay. Anybody? No, it's not. Anybody remember? As humans? Oh, you're killing me. All right. Remember, I'm stomping my foot. This may show up on a bonus question somewhere. Okay. We are lazy and we are prideful. Does anybody remember me saying that? Not even seeing head shaking. Oh no, maybe I didn't share it with this class. All right. So we are lazy and we are prideful. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean lazy in the most endearing terms. I'm not saying that we are we want to shirk responsibility or anything like that. When I say we're lazy, we like routine. We like things to be regular because routine and regular mean less stress for us. And we do, and we'll talk about this when we go into motivation, is we want to reduce the stress that we're experiencing. And anytime we encounter a new situation, we're trying to assess whether or not that situation is going to harm us or that situation is going to help us. If it's not going to be harmful to us, then we can kind of ignore that. And I'll talk about just noticeable difference here in just a minute. But when we get habituated to that situation, it becomes routine to us. We can kind of put it in a nice little packet and put it off to the side because we know it's not going to harm us. But whenever something new is introduced to our lives and our environment, our stress level goes up. And then again, we try and reduce that. So that's what I mean by we're lazy. And you look at it with our technology has gotten so much more advanced just in the last 30, 40 years alone, hasn't it? And think of that I mean, 100 years ago, we were riding around with horses. We didn't have cars. We certainly didn't have cell phones or telephones even, right? So, you know, we've come a long way as a race, and that's because we like to do things more efficiently and easier. That just helps us with our day-to-day stress level. I jokingly, I know I'm dating myself right now with when I grew up, we didn't have touch phones where you could pick somebody's name and it dials them for you. You know what you had to do? You had to remember 7 digits. So, and I still have a lot of those digits stuck in my head from, you know, calling my grandparents and my aunts and uncles and my cousins and my best friend and even my home number, which I can recite to this day. That's something that we found an easier way to do, and we did as a society, as a culture, right? So anyway, his message is about overcoming fear and thinking outside the box and not looking at our disabilities, but our super abilities, okay? Because if we lose function in one area, that, as I think, who was it? Matthew, I believe, said that we raise our abilities in other areas, right? So really cool stuff. I just wanted you to take away, I know your book goes through all the senses and we are not gonna have near the time to do that. So I wanted to give you a couple terms before we, before we get out of here. Just so you understand them a little bit better. So let me share my screen one more time. All right, so the first term that I want you to write down and be aware of is called absolute threshold. Now, absolute threshold is, let me spell it first. Absolute threshold is the least amount of energy for us to see a stimulus 50% of the time. And not see, I'm sorry, detect. Detect stimulus 50% of the time, okay? So why is that important? This, we see this a lot. Anybody that's been through an audiology test to test your hearing to see what your minimum thresholds are. You might do that with an eye test to see 50% of the time when you can make out whatever letter they're showing you up on that wall. That's what they're looking for. The minimum of that you're going to see that 50% of the time. That tells us that you're able to detect that. So for example, if you took a pin and just hovered it above your finger and without looking, you were able to report feeling a sensation in that, the closer you get, 50% of the time that you felt that would mark your absolute threshold. Does that make sense? Now that's different from JND, or just noticeable difference. Because it's the smallest difference or change in stimulus where you detect 50% of the time. So I did this experiment with my live face-to-face classes. I usually do this every year, where I walk in and before the students even enter the auditorium, I have a small mid-range tone it's very, like, I start off at I think it's like 8 decibels or something. And throughout the class, like every minute, I up at a decibel until we get to about, maybe 20 minutes into the class, and it's a humming sound. And anybody that walked into the class late would notice that sound. However, students that have been sitting there the whole time aren't even aware of that. Why is that?
They're probably used to hearing the sound, like maybe you turn it on, they notice for a little bit, and then it's like they almost like tune it out, or somebody just arrives into the room.
Okay.
So like, what's that sound like? We'll hear it.
Okay, I think I was able to make that out. Just out of curiosity, was anybody else hearing the glitching in that?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to
Yeah,
make sure.
I
No, that's not your fault. Sometimes, it's the network, but I tried to make out what you were saying, and it sounds like just with people that small increases, it's harder to detect, right? That's essentially what you were saying? I think is what I heard.
Yeah, basically, it's like somebody who's been sitting there for a while and listening to it. They hear it at first, but then they tune it out, or somebody just comes into the room. They're gonna hear it. They're like, "What's that sound?" Because they're just hearing it, like they're just coming across it.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. So they're kind of like a frog in a boiling pot, right? You've all heard that expression, that a frog, as you bring up the temperature, if you put a frog into a boiling pot, it's probably going to try and jump out. But if you slowly bring, it sounds really cruel, but don't try this at home. But if you start bringing the heat up on that temperature, that frog will probably likely just think, hey, this is nice bath water, and not jump out to the point where they might boil.
Are you speaking from experience?
Nope. We did not do that in biology class when I went in high school.
I know, I'm just teasing.
But anyway, there's a lot of truth to that, that we don't notice. And maybe you've been that, you have a roommate that is gradually bringing up the volume on their TV or their stereo, right? Or somebody in the family. Until you're at the point where, oh my gosh, this is really loud. How did it get so loud? And that's why, because you're not detecting the difference to the point where it's triggering your mind to say something's changing here. Okay, so again, just noticeable difference, or JND is the kind of shorthand way of doing that, is just noticing a difference 50% of the time. So for example, if I did 3 decibels per minute, somebody might have caught on to that. And if I had 50% of the students say, hey, I heard that noise change by a little bit, then that would be the JND. That would demonstrate JND. Does that make sense? Okay. So one other area that I do want, that seems to be a difficult concept to understand, is how our vision works. And now I think your book spends a lot of time on vision because it's primarily what takes up most of our energy. And it's like Daniel Kish was talking about, and I think Mark had mentioned as well, when we lose our eyesight, our other senses tend to be enhanced. And it's not that they're, well, I mean, they are enhanced. There's more capacity for us to really take those stimuli in, as opposed to, because our eyesight, we put a lot of energy into what we see, right? Don't we? And you think about that. And in fact, I have a challenge for anybody that's willing to do this safely. Might be some extra credit points in it for you, up to 10 extra credit points for anybody that is willing to go blind for now. Don't physically harm yourself, but maybe put a blindfold on, and see how long you can go without, feeling things around, maybe in your home. Don't drive, but going through that for at least 3 days to see what you pick up and what has changed for you. If your hearing enhances, if your smell enhances, and then do a little bit of like a write-up and a presentation for the class. So if anybody's interested in doing that, email me and Brianna, and we'll give you the details of it. But just a quick little write-up of your experience, minimum of 3 days, just to see how that goes for you. It'd be a fun little experiment if you want to do it. But anyway, so with our eyesight, we have an image that enters our lens and our cornea and projects on the back of our eye wall onto an area that we call our optic optic nerve. Okay, so our optic nerve really covers the whole back. Maybe I'm not using a great color here. This whole back area of the eye wall, with the exception of our blind spot, our optic disc. Okay, so when images are broadcasted in this area, they land on what are called rods and cones. Now, our cones detect what? Anybody want to guess?
Isn't it like red, blue, or something like that?
Yeah, color, right?
Colors, yeah, Chris said that.
So one of the unique things about humans is that we are able to detect color. We are not nocturnal. We don't thrive at night. In fact, our night vision is very, very terrible compared to many other species. So cones detect color, rods detect black and white. So our rods are more important at night for us during low light conditions. It's still not optimal. We don't have the eyes of cats or anything. Cats can survive pretty well at night. We don't. And that's another reason why we sleep at night, which we'll talk about next week when we talk about consciousness. So anyway, that's important to understand, that cones detect color, rods detect black and white. But those signals are sent to our brain to process into what we call perception. And this is going to play into what you do for this assignment this week. Is what do you see? Why are you seeing it? Is it a visual illusion, or is it a perceptual illusion? Okay, and what principles, Gestalt or top down, bottom up, is it that's at play there? Okay, any questions or any comments? Okay, so next week we will be covering, I'm sorry, next week, Friday, we'll be covering, we'll talk a little bit more about perception and why we perceive the way, what the mental processes are that go into this, all right? Do we have any questions about anything?
Yeah, I actually have a question on like the perception aspect.
Okay.
So I remember you saying you were in the military, right? So With night vision, when you look through that for a long period of time, I've always wondered this because I've had this happen to me a million times. Whenever you lift your nods up, you're left with like the green, vision from it. Why is that? Is there like any scientific explanation? Because I've always wondered that why it's
Well,
like burned.
because those sensory receptors in your eyes are constant. It's called iconic memory, and we have something very similar with our ears. It's called echoic memory. So if you, for example, everybody try this right now. Look intently at your screen, and then close your eyes really quick. Can you still kind of make out the outline of the screen that's in front of you? That's because your rods and your cones are chemically activated. They're still producing a little bit of a signal, and when you take away that stimulus altogether, there's a residual of that. And that also plays into facts, Doug, you can probably relate to this. When you do take those off, you're almost blind to everything for a while. You still see the green, but it takes a while for your eyes to adapt to regular light or absence of light, right? So anyway, did that answer your question? You still have the residual?
Yeah, that answered my question.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments or? How'd you all like that video? Were you able to hear it clearly? Was it glitching at all?
It was
No.
like a little bit in the beginning, but then I could hear it.
Okay. And the reason I ask is because I'm considering doing a movie next week. Now I'm going to have some extra credits throughout the semester. I will tell you right now, because I have a lot of students that want to bank extra credit points. If you have an A in my class, you can't get above an A. You're not going to be able to get above 100 or anything like that. But if for whatever reason, say you missed out on an assignment, I'll have little 5 and 10 point extra credits throughout the semester. So one of the things I'm thinking about doing, I think I have a good way to do videos. I have a good video collection for psychology and pop culture stuff too. Like for next week, I'm thinking, since we're dealing with consciousness and dreams, I'm thinking about doing Inception. So a really good movie, and there's some really cool theoretical concepts in there that I'd like to talk about and discuss, but I'll give you more details next week. All right. So that's all I have for you today. If you have anything that you need to speak with me one-on-one, I do have about 5 minutes, not a whole lot of time today because I have another class I have to get to. So go ahead, hang back, and I'll help you the best I can. All right. Have a good day, everybody. I'll see you Friday.
Thank you. Good day.
I actually had
Thank
to
you.
talk to you about something.
Okay.